When it comes to off-road capability, there is one motorcycle brand that outshines all other bike manufacturers. One with some of the most adventurous, daring, and batshit crazy riders of all time. That brand is KTM, and before KTM was an international superstar, the company almost failed twice. Today, we are taking a road trip on the history of KTM. Let's go back to 1943. This is engineer Johann TRUNKENPOL, aka Hans. He works on cars and operates one of the largest car repair shops in Austria, Mattighofen. During the war, Hans and his team of 35 employees repaired trucks for the military. Fast forward to 1945, Germany loses the war, and so Hans has to go back to fixing regular old cars. This time, things were a bit different. After World War II, the European economy was in shambles. Millions were jobless, and most couldn't afford to own a car. So Hans didn't have any cars to repair. And that's when motorcycles entered the picture. You see, motorcycles back then were a cheaper form of transportation. So in 1953, Hans partners up with Ernst Kussen and Fritz Moser to produce the KTM R100. A 98cc hand-pulled engine with a 2-speed gearbox, 3 horsepower, and a rigid body frame so you can really get a feel for the road. It was basic, but it sold. Later that year, Hans and businessman Ernest KRONREIF joined together to form KTM Motorcycles. And this is the official beginning of the KTM brand. Together, they produced a series of great motorcycles. In 1954, KTM introduces the R125 Tourist. This motorcycle has foot controls, it has 6 horsepower, a Rotax engine with kickstart. Then, that same year, they released the Melbell scooter. In 1955, they released the Grand Tourist and Tarzan sports bike. In 1957, the Trophy sports bike, the Meki moped, and the Mustang R150. Now, KTM couldn't just build motorcycles and expect them to sell. They had to prove that these bikes were capable. So in 1954, KTM decided that they would ride the R125 from Paris to Vienna. A trip that was 1,278 kilometers long. It took the KTM team 21 hours to complete the trip, proving that a KTM was indeed faster than the ALBERG express train, which did the same trip in 24 hours. And if that wasn't enough to convince you to buy KTM, the company started winning races. KTM won gold at the Austrian 125cc championship in 1954, then secured another gold and 2 bronze medals at the International 6 Days in 1956. And just as KTM was beginning its off-road racing legacy, things started to take a turn for the worse. In 1958, KTM sales began to plummet, forcing the company to stop motorcycle production and all racing events. So now you're probably wondering, how is a company that is building great motorcycles and winning championships suddenly stop making money? Well, for that answer, you'll have to look at the economy. By the late 1950s, Europe had recovered from the war. And this meant 2 things. This meant that people now had money and they could now afford to buy a car. And this marks sort of the dark days of the motorcycle industry, where demand for bikes declined substantially, driving many bike manufacturers to bankruptcy. KTM, however, managed to survive by selling one thing and one thing only.
Now that's a makeshift moped right there.
Mopeds, or anything 50 cc's and under, allowed people to get around without having to own a license. So these vehicles became incredibly popular with teenagers. Between 1960 and 1968, KTM was solely a moped manufacturer, and they sold them in 3 different models. They had the 1960 Pony Scooter, a tasteful, sophisticated ride. The 1964 Comet, a bike that looks like a motorcycle, but it isn't. It's a moped, and so you can get all the cool points of riding a bike without actually having to get a license. And finally, the 1968 Hobby, which was basically a bicycle with a motor, just in case you didn't feel like pedaling that day. I should probably mention that at this point, Hans and Ernest, the founders of KTM, are no longer with us. The company is now being run by Hans' son, Eric. By the mid-1960s, the moped industry was booming. KTM sold 10,000 Comets by 1966, and everything was back to normal by 1970. So KTM went back to doing what it does best, producing radiators and building some kick-ass off-road motorcycles, like the GS125 and the GS175 and the Motocross 250. This bike was crucial in leading Gennady Moiseev to victory at the 1974 Motocross World Championships. KTM motorcycles were hot, so hot in fact that Americans wanted a piece of the pie. So in 1968, Enduro rider and entrepreneur John Penton imported KTM bikes and sold them under the name Penton Motorcycles. They sold so well that KTM expanded to North America in 1978 through the establishment of KTM America Incorporated, located in Lorain, Ohio. By the 1980s, KTM was huge. It was a multi-million-dollar company. It had over 700 employees, and they were developing some of the coolest motorcycle tech at the time. They developed the first 125cc water-cooled motocross bikes. They fitted their bikes with pro-level rear suspension and became the first motorcycle manufacturer to offer front and rear disc brakes on an off-road motorcycle.
Okay, I love this cool tech, but what does it all mean for KTM?
Well, it meant winning all categories in the International 6 Days Enduro in 1986. It meant winning 22 medals at the Motocross World Championships since their return in 1974. It meant that KTMs were the only machines that could truly compete against the Japanese manufacturers: Suzuki, Honda, Yamaha, and Kawasaki. These 4 brands dominated racing and sales in the 80s.
The good news is, this year we're gonna be riding them new Yamaha.
KTM, on the other hand, dominated racing, expensive parts, and impressive unreliability. Fast forward to 1987. KTM scooters and the few light motorcycles that they produce just aren't selling. The company stops vehicle production in 1988, and the company goes bankrupt in 1991. And that's the story of KTM. Thanks for watching. Alright, just kidding. KTM doesn't quit. The bankrupt company is acquired by Cross Industries in 1991. Cross Industries is owned by this guy here, Stefan Perrier, the new CEO of KTM and the man responsible for bringing KTM back from the dead. First thing Stefan does is establish a new motorcycle division, KTM Sports Motorcycle. He understood that in order for KTM to truly stand a chance, the company needed to significantly improve their design and build quality.
Whoa! Hey, should we all get back? Is that thing gonna blow up?
So he brings in the Kiska design firm. The Kiska team makes everything orange and sexy. In 1994, they release a fun supermoto for the road, the 620 Duke. It does okay, could use more power. So Stefan throws more money into R&D. KTM acquires Husselberg, then acquires White Power Suspension. By the 2000s, KTM has 3 core bikes: the Duke, the Adventure, and the Supermoto. These bikes would grow in size every single year. More CCs, more horsepower, more fun. Some bikes were just awful, like the 950 Adventure.
What the hell is even that?
But most bikes sold incredibly well, like the KTM Super Duke.
Nice.
KTM expands their lineup even more. They produce a super bike, they gang up with Polaris, produce a track car, and grow to become the best-selling brand in Europe. KTM was on fire.
Oh, that's hot. That's hot.
They bought Husqvarna in 2013. They partnered up with some of the best riders in the world and completely eradicated the competition in off-road racing. KTM's racing post-bankruptcy was magnificent. KTM has 222 Dakar Rally wins, far more than any other manufacturer. They have 45 Enduro World Championships, also more than any other manufacturer. Then they went over to Motocross World Championships and took over that too, winning a whopping 33 times in the last 20 years. So not only were these bikes extremely capable and well designed, but these were the bikes that all the pros were using. And that's how KTM became such a premium brand. It's the motorcycle brand for the best of the best. A community of some of the most skilled, dedicated, and adventurous riders in the entire world. And for that reason, and for many other reasons, is why people choose to ride orange. This has been a road trip on the history of KTM.
If you've made it this far into the video, thank you so much for watching my take on the history of KTM. If you want more videos like these on different motorcycle brands, let me know in the comments below. Thank you again for watching. Have a good night. Take care, and I'll catch you in the next one.